Why are all those people smiling? I'm Angela Lansbury, and there's no mystery there at all. They've all had cornea transplant surgery to restore their sight. Last year, more than 40,000 such transplants were performed in the United States. And I'd like to tell you about the pioneering institution that led the way for all of these sight-saving procedures, the Eye Bank for Sight Restoration in New York City. It all started back in 1944 in a corner of the Manhattan Eye, Ear and Throat Hospital. An ophthalmologist, Dr. Richard Townley Payton, was convinced that thousands of blind people could get their sight back. He had already seen in his own practice the amazing results of a little-used procedure called cornea transplantation. When the clear outer surface of the eye, the cornea, is damaged by disease or injury, the resulting blindness can be cured by removing the cornea and replacing it with healthy tissue provided by an eye donor. Dr. Payton was confident that people would be willing to make such a gift at their death. They could sign pledge cards, leaving their eyes just as they wrote wills, leaving their property. But a system would have to be set up to receive and distribute donor tissue. In short, what was needed was an eye bank. And in the spring of 1944, a dedicated group of medical and lay people formed the Eye Bank for Sight Restoration. The fledgling Eye Bank was fortunate to team up with a dynamic woman who was a genius at mobilizing people, Ida Breckenridge. Largely through her efforts, in a few short years, thousands of people had signed eye donor pledge cards. Many famous people, from Hollywood celebrities to presidents and their wives, carried the message of eye donation to the public. Stories about the exciting new development appeared in newspapers and magazines across the country. Hospitals all over the U.S. signed on to work with the Eye Bank. Red Cross drivers took the precious packages to airports, where Eastern Airlines pilots flew them to New York. There, skilled surgeons transplanted the cornea to people who had been blind for years. Suddenly, they could see. More and more doctors wanted to learn the procedure. The Eye Bank offered courses, and the newly trained surgeons returned home to set up eye banks in their own communities. Much has changed since those early days. Cornea transplantation has become almost a routine medical procedure. Instead of staying in the hospital for a week, patients today can often have the surgery and go home the same day. Advances in surgical instruments and medical technology have further increased the success rate, which was always high. There is now a network of more than 100 eye banks nationwide, joined under the umbrella of the Eye Bank Association of America. Improved processing techniques and more sophisticated communications have enhanced the distribution of tissue nationwide. While much has changed since 1944, the mission of the Eye Bank is still the same: to provide donor eye tissue for sight-saving cornea transplants, research, and medical education. Also, still the same are the stories that people tell, the thousands who gave and the thousands who have received the gift of sight.
First time we heard about the Eye Bank was the day my father died. We were in the emergency room, and the head nurse asked us if we were interested in donating any organs, and we hadn't thought about it. I thought it was a great idea. I just had to check with my mother. I called her up at home and asked if it was okay with her, and she thought it was a good idea, and she thought it was what my father would have wanted.
With all the bad stuff that happened in our life, with his being ill and then his death and the funeral and all the things that go along with it, that's all a lot of bad news. And then to get a letter 2 weeks later to find out that his donation was helping 2 other people was like this sort of glimmer of light in the middle of all this bad news.
I had my first transplant at 19 years of age. I'm now 62 years of age, and everything in between has just been basically a gift, because without the transplant and without the donor, I just would not have the life I had.
12-year-old David Petrarca lost the sight of his right eye when he was hit by a snowball. Just before the cornea transplant that restored his sight, David was asked why people should donate.
I think more people should, because what are they going to do with it when they're dead?
David is right, and thousands like him can also recover their sight if we all pledge to give our eyes when we die. So sign your donor cards now. Tell your family about your wishes. See beyond tomorrow.